Imagine a world where a single whispered accusation could seal your fate, where your neighbor, a person you've known your entire life, could point a trembling finger and name you as the source of all their misery, where the very air is thick with suspicion, and the most logical explanation for a dying cow, a failed harvest, or a child's fever is not bad luck or natural causes, but a malicious, supernatural conspiracy. This wasn't the plot of a fantasy novel. This was reality for thousands of people, primarily women, across Europe and later America, during the era of witch hunts. This is the story of how ordinary human fear, when weaponized by social pressure and institutional power, can curdle into mass hysteria and unleash unimaginable tragedy. To understand the witch hunts, we have to step out of our modern, scientific mindset and into a world that felt profoundly vulnerable. The period from the 15th to the 18th centuries was in many ways a perfect storm. Europe was emerging from the devastation of the Black Death, which had wiped out a third of the population and shattered the old social order. The Little Ice Age was causing crop failures and famines. Religious wars between Catholics and Protestants tore communities apart. It was an era of immense, unpredictable suffering. In such a world, people desperately sought explanations, and more importantly, someone to blame. Misfortune couldn't just be random, it had to have a cause. The idea of the witch provided a perfect, tangible target. She, and it was almost always a she, was a person who had supposedly made a pact with the devil, gaining supernatural powers to harm her neighbors out of sheer spite and malice. This belief system turned abstract fears of hunger, disease, and death into a human face. It created a simple, if terrifying, narrative. Our problems are not caused by climate change or germs, but by the evil among us. And if we can just identify and eliminate that evil, our suffering will end. Mass hysteria doesn't appear out of nowhere. It follows a recognizable pattern, a social contagion that spreads through a community like a virus. Mass hysteria doesn't appear out of nowhere. It follows a recognizable pattern, a social contagion that spreads through a community like a virus. It often starts with a small, unexplained event. In the village of Salem, Massachusetts in 1692, it began with two young girls, Betty Paris and Abigail Williams, experiencing strange fits, screaming, contortions, and sensations of being pinched and pricked. In a highly religious and repressive society, where any deviation from norm was scrutinized, their behavior was immediately pathologized. The local doctor, finding no physical ailment, delivered the fateful diagnosis: the evil hand is upon them. This initial ambiguous event created a vacuum of meaning, and that vacuum was filled by fear. The girls, perhaps initially seeking attention or genuinely frightened by their own symptoms, began to name their tormentors. They accused three marginalized women: Tituba, an enslaved Caribbean woman; Sarah Good, a homeless beggar; and Sarah Osborne, an elderly woman who had married her indentured servant. These were easy targets. They existed on the fringes of polite society, they were disliked, and they had no powerful defenders. The accusation stuck because it confirmed the community's existing prejudices. This is the first crucial step in the cycle of hysteria, the creation of a we and a they. The we are the good, God-fearing people, the victims. The girls, perhaps initially seeking attention or genuinely frightened by their own symptoms, began to name their tormentors. They accused three marginalized women: Tituba, an enslaved Caribbean woman; Sarah Good, a homeless beggar; and Sarah Osborne, an elderly woman who had married her indentured servant. These were easy targets. They existed on the fringes of polite society. They were disliked, and they had no powerful defenders. The accusations stuck because it confirmed the community's existing prejudices. This is the first crucial step in the cycle of hysteria, the creation of a we and a they. The we are the good, God-fearing people, the victims. The they are the hidden enemies, the corruptors, the witches. This division justifies any action taken against the accused because they are no longer seen as fully human. They are vessels of evil. And once the first accusations are made, the panic becomes self-perpetuating. To not believe the accusers is to side with the devil. To show doubt is to risk being accused yourself. The only safe path is to join the chorus of condemnation. While popular panic provides the fuel, it is the involvement of official institutions that turns fear into a systematic, deadly machine. In Europe, the publication of the Malleus Maleficarum, or the Hammer of Witches, in 1487 provided a detailed, pseudo-legal manual for identifying, prosecuting, and executing witches. Written by a disgruntled German clergyman, it was a misogynistic text that argued women were inherently more susceptible to demonic influence because of their carnal lust. This book gave intellectual and theological justification to the hunts. Then came the legal proceedings, which were stacked overwhelmingly against the accused. The standard legal protections were often suspended. Anonymous accusations were allowed. The concept of spectral evidence, the idea that a witch could send her specter to torment her victims, was accepted in courts like Salem, meaning an accuser could simply claim to have seen the defendant's ghostly form, and that was considered proof. But the most insidious tool was torture. Authorities operated on the belief that a witch's mark, a spot on the skin insensitive to pain, was a sign of a pact with the devil. They would poke and prod the accused with needles. If the person felt pain, they were human. If they didn't, it was proof of witchcraft. It was a no-win scenario. And then there was the torture to extract a confession, the ultimate goal of the inquisitors. Why a confession? Because it validated the entire process. A confession proved that the judges were right, that the threat was real, and that their actions were justified. Under extreme duress, people would confess to impossible things, flying on broomsticks, attending witches' sabbaths, consorting with the devil. These coerced confessions were then used as evidence to accuse even more people, creating a terrifying domino effect. The system was designed not to find truth, but to produce guilty verdicts. It's easy to get lost in the numbers. Historians estimate that between 40,000 and 60,000 people were executed for witchcraft in Europe over 3 centuries. But behind every number is a human story, a life extinguished in terror and agony. Let's remember a few. Bridget Bishop, the first person executed in Salem, was a bold, outspoken woman who owned a tavern and wore flashy clothes. She didn't conform to the Puritan ideal of female meekness, and for that, she was hanged. Or consider the case of the Bamberg Witch Trials in Germany, where the mayor, Johannes Junius, was accused in 1628. Before his execution, he managed to smuggle a letter to his daughter, written on the lid of a tobacco jar. He described the horrific tortures he endured, having his limbs crushed in thumbscrews. The victims were disproportionately women, especially those who were old, poor, widowed, or in any way unconventional. They were the vulnerable, the outsiders, the people who didn't fit in. The witch hunt was, at its core, a brutal form of social control, a way to police the boundaries of acceptable behavior and eliminate those who were deemed a burden or a threat to the community's fragile stability. We like to think of the witch hunts as a dark, superstitious chapter from a distant past, a mistake we've evolved beyond. But the psychological and social dynamics that fueled them are very much alive today. Mass hysteria is not a medieval relic. It is a recurring feature of human societies under stress. We may no longer fear witches, but we have our own modern-day scapegoats. Think of the Red Scares of the 20th century, where fear of communism led to blacklists, ruined careers, and a culture of paranoid accusation where being a fellow traveler could be as damning as being a party member. The same pattern emerged: an external threat, a climate of fear, a we versus they mentality, and institutions like the House Un-American Activities Committee giving official sanction to the hunt. Or consider the satanic ritual abuse panic of the 1980s and 1990s, where terrifying but completely unfounded stories of underground satanic cults abusing children spread through communities and the media, leading to wrongful convictions based on coerced testimony from traumatized children. The parallels to spectral evidence are striking. The fear was real, the panic was contagious, but the threat was a phantom. Even in our digital age, we see the same patterns play out on social media. Online mobs can form in an instant, fueled by outrage and partial information. A single tweet or out-of-context video can lead to a torrent of accusations, doxing, and career destruction. The court of public opinion operates with its own form of spectral evidence and rarely offers the accused a chance for a fair defense. The desire to find a villain, to purge the community of a perceived corrupting influence, is a powerful and dangerous human impulse. So what is the antidote to this cycle of fear and tragedy? The lesson from history is not a simple one, but it begins with vigilance. It requires us to be skeptical of simple explanations for complex problems. When someone offers us a single, evil enemy to blame for our hardships, we must pause and question. It demands that we protect our legal and social institutions from being corrupted by panic, ensuring that the rights of the accused are upheld, even when public sentiment is screaming for blood. The court of public opinion operates with its own form of spectral evidence and rarely offers the accused a chance for a fair defense. The desire to find a villain, to purge the community of a perceived corrupting influence, is a powerful and dangerous human impulse. So, what is the antidote to this cycle of fear and tragedy? The lesson from history is not a simple one, but it begins with vigilance. It requires us to be skeptical of simple explanations for complex problems. When someone offers us a single, evil enemy to blame for our hardships, we must pause and question. It demands that we protect our legal and social institutions from being corrupted by panic, ensuring that the rights of the accused are upheld, even when public sentiment is screaming for blood. The witch hunts stand as a grim monument to the power of fear. They remind us that societies are fragile, and that the line between a peaceful community and a persecuting mob is thinner than we'd like to admit. By understanding how these tragedies happened, we arm ourselves against the forces that created them. We learn to question the accusation, to defend the unpopular, and to see the humanity in everyone, especially when fear tries to tell us otherwise. If you're finding these insights valuable, make sure to subscribe to the channel. By hitting that subscribe button, you're not just supporting this work, you're ensuring you don't miss our future videos, where we'll continue to break down complex topics into clear, actionable ideas. Your subscription is the best way to build a library of knowledge together.